A country where you can't lampoon a sitting president is not a free country.
If you don't think we are under a regime with an authoritarian strategy, then you are bugging.
Today's a day that ends in Y, so mainstream media and democratic elites are in meltdown mode for no real reason. We're going to break down the latest controversy that's got many of our friends on the left losing it a little bit for no real reason, and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, we're going to talk about Stephen Colbert, whose show, it was just announced, has been canceled by its parent company, CBS, aka Paramount, and people are very upset about this, not least among them Stephen Colbert himself.
Before we start the show, I want to let you know something that I found out just last night. Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feeling.
If you're a fan of the show, it makes sense that you would be sad that it's over. I always, whenever something gets canceled, I feel bad for the staff that work on it. I don't really think Stephen Colbert is particularly funny or insightful in any way these days, so I won't be shedding any tears for his show, but I never like to see people lose work, and so not exactly cheering for it either, but I certainly do not think that it is some sign of dystopian end times or mounting fascism or anything like that. Yet that is quite ironically what many progressive commentators have suggested. Here was CNN media analyst Brian Stelter on air.
A country where you can't lampoon a sitting president is not a free country. A country where you can't publish editorial cartoons or have late night monologues or have satires about the president is not a democratic country. Of course, we're not there. We're not there at all right now. There are lots and lots of figures who are famous for mocking and deriding President Trump. But the idea that Colbert might be taken off the air, that his voice might be silenced, it certainly is creating a little bit of a chill in the air today, Dana.
There is absolutely no shortage of voices bashing or mocking Trump on television. In fact, you can find them on CNN and many other networks every single day, all day, every day. And even Colbert is still going to have a large voice and a platform and can still say whatever he likes. He's just losing his show, which, as we'll explain later, is much more of a commercial decision than a political one, despite how it's being portrayed. But the hysteria really is off the charts. Here's MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes. He wrote in a tweet, "Not really an overstatement to say that the test of a free society is whether or not comedians can make fun of the country's leader on TV without repercussions." I don't necessarily disagree with this sentiment. I just think it's being totally inaccurately applied here. You can mock the president on TV. You can insult the president on TV. You can lampoon him on social media, on YouTube, on every single platform. Tons of people do it to massive audiences every single day. And Stephen Colbert has, and will continue to. He's just losing a massively expensive show in a declining area of entertainment, late night comedy. But these folks really do think it's like some kind of authoritarian doomsday nightmare. Here's a clip of Charlemagne the God speaking on that.
Canceling Colbert is an obvious move to appease Donald Trump. And I need to tell y'all something. If you don't think we are under a regime with an authoritarian strategy, then you are bugging. This is textbook authoritarian rule. Target your critic, centralize power in a few hands, intimidate through punishment or removal. And you know what that usually does? Shuts people the F up.
Here is the celebrity Jamie Lee Curtis adding her 2 cents.
It's bad. He's a great guy. They just cut NPR and, public broadcasting. Yes, they're trying to silence people, but that won't work. Won't work. We will just get louder.
And of course, on our favorite media platform, TikTok, they are treating this in similarly alarmist tones.
The fact that the Colbert Show was canceled last night, like, it's really scary. And then the fact that the president comes on and tweets that right after, like, you can't tell me. You can't tell me it has to do with money. You really can't. And they're trying to silence us. And they're doing it in a huge, huge way. And it's really concerning.
But what are the actual facts? Is this hysteria rooted in a grain of truth, or is it just a unhinged temper tantrum? I'm going to break it down and show you the things that they left out of these rants after this. It increasingly seems like culture war stories are at the heart of our politics, but these are the exact stories where it can be hardest to figure out what's actually going on. Media spin and partisan bias aside. The only way to figure out what's really going on is with Ground News, an amazing service I've used for years that helps me prepare this show. Ground News gathers news all around the world in one place, so you can see what both sides are saying and make up your own mind. Take California's ongoing feud with the Trump administration over transgender athletes in women's sports, for example. If you look at the left-leaning headlines that Ground News has aggregated, they read, for example, this one from the San Francisco Chronicle, California won't comply with Trump demand for state to ban trans athletes. But if you look at right-leaning media, like this report from the Daily Signal, California defies Trump again as state refuses to follow trans athlete order. There's a big difference there. And if you don't take my word for it, the Nobel Peace Center even called Ground News an amazing way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. Plus, it's been recognized by Apple as App of the Day 5 times across 38 countries. Stop missing out. You can get the same plan that I use, which is the Vantage subscription, by going to the link on screen, ground.news/Brad, or by scanning the QR code on screen to get 40% off your access, which comes out to just about $5 a month. This exclusive discount is available through my link, so act now to burst your media bubble and keep your critical thinking skills sharp. Okay, guys, let's take a look at the actual facts of the situation. And spoiler alert, they dispel some of the alarmism and hysteria that you've just heard. So, the reporter from Puck News, Matthew Bologna, reported, the timing and optics are terrible, but Stephen Colbert's show costs more than $100 million a year to produce and is losing more than $40 million a year. CBS executives had been mulling for a long time whether to pull the plug. Now, CNN did its own reporting, trying really hard to find somebody inside CBS to tell them, yes, this was politically motivated. This was because they want to appease Trump, which, to be clear, CBS has tried to appease Trump in other ways, like settling what was, I think, a not really legitimate lawsuit against them from President Trump while they're seeking approval for a merger. So the idea that they would be influenced by Trump is not crazy, but it's just not actually what happened with Colbert's case, at least. Not even according to the insiders at CBS who were granted anonymity. Their names weren't included. You can tell us the truth anonymously. They still would not say it had anything to do with politics. CNN reports, according to sources close to the network, The Late Show was losing money and there was no apparent path to turn around its financial position. It was an agonizing decision, as the executives admitted in a statement. But CBS insiders insist, even when speaking frankly on the condition of anonymity, that the move was financially driven, not politically motivated. This is the tea, guys. Even when they got these people who are almost certainly liberal Trump haters, right? Executives around The Late Show, when they gave them anonymity and said, just tell us what's happening here, they still said, no, sorry, guys, it's not political, it's financial. And it makes sense. What kind of network would allow a show to run $100 million budget every year while losing $40 million? That's insane. Those are huge sums. This show, yes, it did get relatively high ratings. That is true. But that's only useful or positive insofar as you're able to turn a profit. If the exorbitant costs are up here and you have good ratings, so you have good revenue, but you're still losing a ton of money, then it would be better to have mediocre ratings but pretty low costs and be turning a profit. So a lot of the Colbert apologists right now are pointing to his ratings, which sure were better than his competitors in many cases, but that's not the story here. The story is a financial story. And in fact, I saw Bridget Fedesi point this out on X, the comedian and commentator. Colbert was not canceled for political reasons. It was actually kept on for political reasons. And if it was profitable, it would have remained. I think that if this hadn't been a political show, if this hadn't been like a beloved anti-Trump warrior, they would have canceled this guy years ago when he started losing them tens of millions of dollars. It seems plausible to me that he only clung on as long as he did because of politics, not that he was fired because of it, despite being amazing. I don't buy that. I just don't. There's another aspect of this as well. Colbert recently took to his show to bash his own employers about the lawsuit they settled with Trump. Now, as Dave Portnoy pointed out, the CEO of Barstool Sports, that is not something employees are typically able to do without repercussions from their bosses. I worked at several media companies. Never would I have publicly trashed them and expected to continue to earn a fat paycheck, especially while losing money. Even if you were a super profitable employee, you can't really do that. But when you're losing the massive amounts of money and then you trash them publicly, that's diabolical. And it's really speaks of an arrogance that you think you're untouchable, but you're not. No one is untouchable. And at the end of the day, corporations care about money. But here's Dave Portnoy on that. I thought he had some interesting thoughts on this subject.
Colbert makes $16 million a year. The Late Show with Colbert loses $40 to $50 million a year. They have a staff of 200 people. Late night ratings are down across the board. He's still got the best ratings of like him, Kimmel, and Fallon, but across the board, they're down. So all these shows presumably getting hammered. For these people, including like Colbert, to be like, this isn't really right, that we're blindsided. Buddy, you're losing $40 million a year. You have 200 people creating one show. We have 200 people at Barstool, content creators, creating like 30 shows. And some of them, the bigger ones, draw a bigger audience than Colbert. So like, what are we talking about? And then you compound that with Colbert openly going on air, being like, I don't trust CBS. This relationship can never be repaired. I can't believe they bowed or paid that lawsuit to Trump. If one of my employees, who I was paying $16 million a year while losing $40 million a year, went on their show and was like, I don't like Dave. I don't trust Dave. You know what I would do? Like, welcome to the real fucking world.
I will absolutely admit that some of the things that Trump has said and done towards the press concern me and threaten the freedom of press. This just isn't one of them, because I do not believe that this was primarily political. It's a financial decision, and no one, not Stephen Colbert, not me, not anyone, is entitled to a show at a network that's losing millions and millions of dollars every year. Seriously, like that's just a insane thing to expect or think that you're ever going to get to keep into perpetuity, especially because, like they said, there was no path to it getting better or being fixed. So what, are they just supposed to bleed millions of dollars every year into perpetuity because he's making fun of Trump? Yeah, other people can do that and not lose so much money, I imagine. So I find all the hysteria to be baseless. To me, it's another boy who cried wolf example where they're yelling fascism or whatever when it's not that in this case. And there's another aspect of this I want to talk about. So Democratic politicians, after the news came out about Colbert's cancellation, came out in near uniform to say how amazing he was. And so many of them put out statements with this key word, that he was willing to speak truth to power. What an activist, what a stunning, brave guy. He would stand up to the powerful people. But of course, these politicians are the powerful people. So Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader, the leader of the Democrats in the House, wrote on Twitter, "Thank you, Stephen Colbert, for your willingness to speak truth to power, staying far from timid, and never bending the knee to a wannabe king." Similarly, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota and the failed Democratic vice presidential nominee, wrote, "Stephen Colbert is the best in the business. He's always told truth to power and pulled no punches. We need more of that, not less." And somebody I follow on Twitter, Trace Woodgrains, wrote of this Tim Walz tweet, "A touching tribute You can really tell the way Colbert spoke truth to power by how cheerful power looks as they laugh together, because it's an image of him and Tim Walz laughing together over coffee. And that's the funny thing about this to me. If Colbert really spoke truth to power and was this brave voice that called everyone out, Democratic politicians who are one side of power, right, and have been Biden, they were in charge of the country quite recently, wouldn't be such big fans of him, wouldn't be clapping and saying how wonderful he was and how much no, he was a softball for them and then an absolute bomb thrower against Republicans. That's why they like him. But that's not speaking truth to power. That's doing propaganda for one side of the aisle. And that's why I really don't think that Stephen Colbert's show ending is, let alone some act of fascism, which it's certainly not, is really that much of a loss for media in the country. It wasn't particularly funny, and it didn't really provide anything we can't get anywhere else without costing $100 million a year. But what do you guys think? Are you still fans of Colbert's show? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Remember to check out the merch line, links in the description, and send in your voicemails and your voice notes for our Voicemail Friday episodes, where I react to your woke horror stories, your personal life scenarios, and your questions that you might have for me. Also, guys, don't forget that you can take the Brad versus Everyone podcast with you on the go and listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, guys, let's talk about our second story for the day, which is MAGA influencers, some of the biggest Republican voices on the internet, getting out way ahead of their skis and seemingly believing and thinking that Barack Obama, the former president, is going to be perp-walked and prosecuted and locked up at long last because of a bombshell report that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, just released. Here she was, a clip of her on Fox News that Fox entitled, "Nuclear at Tulsi Gabbard accuses Barack Obama-era cabal of a treasonous conspiracy to take down real Donald Trump, claiming intel was manufactured to sell the Russia hoax and demanding DOJ action against the elites behind it." Here is that clip of Tulsi Gabbard.
The evidence showed, the intelligence showed that, again, Russia did not have either the intent nor the capability to be able to impact the outcome of the United States election. So it was very striking when we look back again at the documents that I declassified and released that shows there was a shift. In early December, the first week of December, again, another document was produced by the intelligence community, a president's daily brief that was consistent with every other assessment that was done previously leading up to the election. Russia did not, this is after the election now, did not attempt to affect the outcome of the American election.
So there are a couple problems here, and I went and I reviewed the full X thread where Tulsi Gabbard laid out all her findings. The biggest one seems to be a conflation of several things. And first, I just want to give you guys some context. When we talk about Russiagate or the Russia hoax, what we're talking about is the narrative that emerged after, and it was huge on CNN, MSNBC, Democratic politicians ran with it, that Putin had handed the election to Trump in 2016, that he had, and crucially, that Trump had colluded with him to rig the election through two main things: social media disinformation farms, you hear about Russian bots and Russian trolls, and hacked and leaked materials where they hacked emails, for example, from the DNC and then released them to hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign. But what Tulsi Gabbard mentions in this thread and in this post is intelligence briefings that Obama received that confirmed that Russia did not hack the election itself, the voting tallies, the systems to tabulate ballots, anything like that, that they probed some of that stuff, but they didn't actually change the votes or the ballots. What is so bizarre about this is that the Tulsi Gabbard narrative here, accusing Obama and others in his administration of seditious conspiracy, a very serious federal offense, is that she's conflating a couple different things. She's saying, well, they had this evidence that Russia didn't try to affect the outcome of the election and they didn't release it. And then there was this whole narrative, but that's not what the evidence says. What the evidence said, the intelligence community reports, said specifically, and you can see it in the post she herself linked in the thread, that Russia did not try to change the vote tallies. Yes. However, even bipartisan reports by the Senate confirmed Republican-authored and led investigations and reports. The Mueller report, which found that Trump did not collude with Russia, could not prove that he colluded, found that Russia did try to influence the election through its mass disinformation campaigns, through its social media trolls, through its hacking attempts. Now, I don't think those attempts were very successful, and Trump didn't collude with them to do it. That was the big hoax, the big narrative that they pushed for years. But it's not true to say they didn't try to influence the election or that Obama had evidence that that whole narrative was untrue and baseless. No, he had evidence of one thing, and then this narrative was about something else, which even bipartisan investigations found they did attempt to do. So the whole narrative here is just muddled to me, and it feels like kind of engineered to change the subject, right? Because the Epstein thing is not going well for Trump. His own base, his own supporters are very upset with him. Let's gin up some outrage about Obama. And it's like, dude, he hasn't been president for a decade. Focus on your agenda. Focus on helping the country. Let sleeping dogs lie. Leave Obama alone. That's how I feel about it. But apparently, that is not how MAGA world feels about it, or even President Trump himself, potentially. Here's a clip from Benny Johnson about this bombshell, and including a video, an AI video that Trump himself posted showing Obama being arrested. Let's take a look at this.
What's up, guys? This is not a drill. President Trump just posted a video of Barack Obama getting put on his knees and arrested by the FBI inside of the White House as President Trump looks on, grinning. It's go time. Here we go.
No one, especially the president, is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one 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 is above the law.
Oh, son of a bitch.
The future of MAGA is here. Forgiato Blow. This shit is
Donald
hot.
Trump is your president. 2024, we coming back. Joe Biden in the crowd taking naps. And his son Hunter doing crack. Call me what you want, but don't call me a Democrat. They want to put him in jail, but I write him in even if he's in a cell. I write you in. Y'all need the dead. I'm still coming through your hood in my red hat. I might buy a MAGA chain, let me call my jeweler. I'm exposing all these rhinos like I'm Lord Loomer. We still don't have the manifesto from the trans shooter. Your girl like AOC, I want a girl like Brad Cooper. Woo! Real MAGA gang, you know how I'm rocking.
This is obviously in reference to the Obamagate scandal that has blown up over the last couple of days. Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, releasing bombshell, smoking gun evidence that Barack Obama absolutely committed seditious conspiracy and tried to stage a coup against Donald Trump. It's all there. The facts are there. And now it's been referred to the DOJ for prosecution. Looks like Trump's ready to cook. Let's go.
So this is kind of an insane thing for a president to post. Like, this is kind of deranged. If you were ever going to take the pretty severe step of arresting a former president and your political opponent, posting AI slop on social media is not a serious or competent way to even approach discussion around such a grave issue that would really tear the country apart. It really would. The same way that when they engaged many Democratic officials in politically motivated or partisan prosecutions of Trump, like they did in New York City with Alvin Bragg, that tore the country apart. And if it had been successful and Trump had been imprisoned and all that, that would have been a huge, huge issue in our country. And so to ever even consider doing that to Obama, it would have the same effect. And when you're not, your narrative isn't even clear, what you're alleging doesn't quite add up, and then you're posting AI slop videos about it, that is totally unserious. Now, what was interesting to me is the way that some MAGA influencers like Benny Johnson just hopped on this, but some did ask questions. Can be true that clearly the federal government under Obama went and politicized this approach to figuring out what went on, what was Russia's role in the election. It was clearly massively overstated by the intelligence community's leaks to the media and as an attempt to discredit Trump. I think that is true. But you don't go from that to perp walking Obama for seditious conspiracy. That's not a thing. And even the right-wing influencer, the red-headed libertarian, asked Grok, at Grok, could this be classified as seditious conspiracy? To which Grok replied, no. Manufacturing a false narrative, even to undermine a presidency, does not qualify as seditious conspiracy under 18 U.S. Code 2384, which requires the use of force to overthrow or oppose government authority. The declassified DNI doc suggests politicized intelligence actions, but without force, it's not sedition, potentially other misconduct like fraud or abuse of power. So to be clear, guys, I am not saying that Obama did nothing wrong, that the Russia narratives about Trump were true. No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the idea that you are going to perp walk him for seditious conspiracy is absurd. It would be laughed out of court. And ironically, actually, there was a Supreme Court decision because of the Trump cases that gave presidents immunity for many of their actions while taken in office, especially when it relates to their core presidential duties, of which intelligence gathering and working with the intelligence community, which is part of the executive branch and works under him, is a clear part. So it's possible even that Obama would have immunity for this, even if there was a crime here that could be meaningfully alleged, which so far there simply is not. Politicizing the intelligence community and weaponizing the Russia narrative to discredit Trump was, I think, a real disservice to the country and a really shameful thing that media and government officials alike participated in. But there is not legitimate basis to arrest a former president or his officials over this. And all of it is just so backwards looking and petty and vindictive and partisan when you should be focusing on addressing the issues you were elected to address that actually affect the day-to-day lives of the American people. That's just my take, but clearly a lot of right-wing influencers feel differently than I do. What do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed while you're at it. And do check out the merch. Do send in your voice notes for my Voicemail Friday episodes. And with that, guys, we'll talk again real soon.